and I would like to welcome you to our second breakout session here at LITI 2023. And before we get started, I just want to remind you of some of the interaction guidelines. So please ensure that you're muted unless you're asked to unmute. Your camera can be turned off unless you are asked to turn it on. I encourage you to use the chat to interact with your colleagues and, of course, have a great time. I also just want to draw your attention to the QR code at the bottom of the screen there. That will bring you to the Conference Hub Padlet. I'm also going to throw a link to that in the chat just to ease some of that navigation for you. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't share just a little bit about the Long Island RBERN. We invite you to join our listserv. You can do so by going to our website there and following the directions. But also in a few short weeks, you'll be able to find video recordings of all of the breakout sessions on our YouTube channel. So save that link for the future. And with that, I would like to welcome our presenters, Laura Webster and Christine Lopez from the East Williston School District, who will lead us in a discussion surrounding cultivating language and literacy in the ELL, ELA, ICT classroom, all of the acronyms. So I am going to stop sharing and pass it over to our presenters.
Our first two slides are really just about co-teaching, and we wanted to kick off our session with just kind of like an intro to co-teaching, because I am the ELL teacher in our co-teaching relationship. Christine teaches 6th grade ELA. And as an ELL teacher, I can empathize with how tricky navigating co-teaching relationships can be. And I also recognize how much it has changed over like the past decade. You know, we really used to just push in or pull out, and now we've transitioned into being true co-teachers. And I think lots of schools are still grappling with what exactly that might mean. And so Christine and I have found a lot of success together. And I think a big reason for that is just through communication and trusting one another. But another big reason is because Christine very generously shares the stage with me in the classroom, and she treats me like a true co-teacher. And that in itself has just made our co-teaching relationship really successful. And as a result, our students are successful, and the ELL students have been so well integrated into the environment, because it's not like they're a separate group or I'm a separate teacher who always just works with this one particular group. If you ask majority of our students in the classroom who the ELL teacher was, they probably wouldn't even know. And so for all those reasons, we have found success, and you know, we've just been trying to cultivate that relationship and that dynamic in the classroom. Okay.
All right, so we are going to move on. We're going to take you through what the warm up in our classroom would look like. So one of the things that we have collaborated with each other on is how can we differentiate for our students, and how can we have them transition from their busy days outside the classroom and feel more comfortable inside. Have that wait time, have that time to find their place in the classroom and what they need to get most prepared for the day. So this would be like a little intro activity that we would like you to explore on Pear Deck. So for instance here is the little peppers are the different levels of challenges that we would offer to the students, and through that they would choose. So when we say, let's get spicy, 3, 2, 1, a mild challenge would be find 3 words you would use to describe ELLs. A medium challenge would be 3 words you would use to describe ELLs and 2 questions you have regarding instruction of ELLs. And the spicy challenge would be 3 words you would use to describe ELLs, 2 questions you have regarding instruction of ELLs, and one of your favorite culturally responsive read alouds. So please take a few minutes to respond in the Pear Deck.
you. And yeah, I already see some good responses. If for some reason the Pear Deck isn't working on your end, or you don't have the Pear Deck open, you can also add into our chat if you find that easier. And this strategy we really like, because immediately at the start of the class, all students have access to the task in a way that they can feel successful. So even our lowest level ELL learners and lowest level literacy learners really can feel like they've started the class off participating and getting through a task successfully, which I know that throughout the day, they might not feel that even throughout an entire lesson. And so we have found a lot of success with this kind of format for a warm-up. So I'll just read out, since again, sorry, my screen isn't sharing, some words I love to hear about ELLs. Resourceful, smart, knowledgeable, interesting, creative, nervous, dynamic, love that, diverse, happy, they are so happy, motivated, hardworking, resilient, also one of my favorite words to describe ELLs, curious, sponge-like. A question that I like, how to best remove scaffolds. I think over time, you know, seeing what your students can do and slowly starting to remove that so they get more and more comfortable without that support. Talented, persistent, resilient, wonderful. I agree. I think ELLs are all those things and more, and they're such a joy to work with in the classroom. So we're going to move right along to the next part of Christine and I's lesson in a day in our classroom would be vocabulary. And so I had mentioned before how Christine is really great with kind of sharing the stage. And this is a nice moment for an ELL teacher to kind of take the lead. So thinking about those co-teaching models. And having the two in the front. So maybe Christine would lead the warm up and then I would jump right into our vocab word of the day. And so I brought our word of the day today is translanguaging, which I thought was applicable to our presentation and to this entire conference. And I like to use in the ELL classroom a rating scale of 1, 2, or 3. You can do this quickly, like visually hold up a 1, a 2, or a 3. You could do it in a longer format where maybe they're writing it down, maybe they're proving their knowledge through a sentence. So this is also an interactive Pear Deck where you're just rating this word a 1, 2, or 3 based on how well you know it. 1 being I don't know it. 2, I've seen it, but I'm still not 100% sure. 3, I know this, I can teach it to a friend. And so we have a few responses. I'll give you another minute or two. Looks like we're mostly between 2s and 3s. This strategy of 1, 2, 3 is also nice because it gives you a quick gauge of the classroom of how much time you need to spend on this word. And also kind of like if your students are comfortable with this word or if this is brand new for them. This is also useful at the start of a unit if you have a whole list of words, and then you can pick and choose the words that they gave a 1 to spend more time teaching. So we're going to go on to our next slide where I will teach you the word. And so I love the 4-square vocabulary method. Way back when was kind of like the Frere model. But we use this quite often and the kids actually love it. They love learning new words. They're very engaged during this part of the lesson. So for this, I always pronounce the word first and then have the students pronounce it second, because if they can't pronounce it, they're not going to use it. And I feel that's a step that sometimes we often forget as teachers. So I would say first, translanguaging, and I might break it apart into syllables, especially a lengthier word like this, and then students would repeat it again, and then I might do it again, and so on. I always give a student-friendly definition. So that first box is always filled in by Christine or I. So translanguaging, if you weren't sure, is using one's native language to help communicate and learn a new language. So that looks like many things, especially for our entering ELLs. They might rely on their native language throughout the day to read and write and communicate. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's going to help them transition more easily into their new language. It might also look like our example that we included here, where that's an expanding level student who's writing a 7th grade narrative. And they asked if they could include dialogue in Spanish because his story was between him and his father. And so he naturally translanguaged into his writing, which was amazing for me to see. And just giving students that power and comfortability to be able to use both languages is a wonderful thing in the classroom. So the top box is some examples of ways that we can translanguage in the classroom. And the top box I'll show you on our next screen, that can change. In fact, 3 of these boxes can change to include lots of different ways to practice the word. I do always like to have them either use it in a sentence or answer a question. So that is an interactive paired act response that we won't spend too much time on because of time. But if you wanted to add in a benefit of translanguaging or add it into the chat. But I think translanguaging is really a great thing to go off of what our keynote and introductory speakers spoke about, was just kind of empowering students to feel like they're not learning a new language, but they're expanding upon their first language. So that's our 4 square. And then we would have students, share out their sentences and so on. And then if we go to the next slide, this is a menu of options for the 4 square. So again, I always give the student-friendly definition, but those other 3 boxes you can change up depending on the word and your purpose. So you can add in synonyms, antonyms, lookalikes is nice, especially for ELLs. But again, the rest of your class as language learners, breaking apart the different parts of a word. You can integrate morphology and word parts here. There's so much you can do with this. And again, students really love it. And it's a great interactive piece of our lesson.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to bring you to our next portion of our presentation, which really is going to show translanguaging as an asset to our students. So one of our philosophies in this room is that we want children through literature to be seen and to be heard, and we believe that books are those windows and mirrors for students to reflect themselves in those stories. So what we have done in our class to increase student choice and voice is create these short story tastings. And the purpose was to show a variety of text and authors and genres to the students throughout the year. And it really has been such a fabulous way for the students to find their text for our units and really have more engagement with it through their reading, writing, and thinking and listening. So if you look here, we do have a picture of some of those texts that we have used in our class. Across the Bay by Chris Aponte. In Progress, I would say is more for 7th grade and up, but it is a great short story book of real life stories. And here are some other books that we have used in our classroom, and you might have also used. So if you want to type in the chat anything that you have used here or any other recommendations of multicultural books, we always like to learn from each other. But in particular, we're going to be looking at today, we go through the story, The Most Beautiful Thing, My 2 Border Towns, A Map into the World. Oops, sorry. So I'm going to bring us here a little bit. Sorry, Mrs. Webster, did I skip a slide on you?
It's all good. We're doing great on time. Yeah, we just quickly wanted to talk about the benefits we've seen with the short story tasting. because it really does provide student choice. So you'll see in a moment the format of this short story tasting, but essentially the kids do get to choose their favorite text. And it has really transformed our classroom this year. We didn't do it last year, and it's made a huge difference in the engagement level. And it's just a really nice, natural way of differentiating without the students realizing you're differentiating, because we did feel like one of the challenges last year, especially where East Williston's newly using Teachers College reading and writing. And so some of the texts that we were using were really rigorous. And so for our lower level L's, it was challenging. And for me, it was really challenging to try to kind of pull them along through these difficult texts where we're also supposed to be teaching them reading and writing skills. And so by giving them access to texts that better match their interests and their levels, we've just seen so much more success from our students. And I think us as teachers have felt more successful as well. And so we're big fans of this method, and we've used it throughout our entire year with all different genres. So we're excited for you to kind of experience that short story tasting now.
All right, so we'll take you through the steps here. This was on one of our recent ones. We did a narrative nonfiction short story tasting, and we got these articles right from Scholastic News. We thought about our student population and what their interests were, and we picked the top 4 texts that we thought would engage them. And one of the things that we do is we, in this little red bin, use clear, transparent folders. You can get them right on Amazon, and we show them the different text. And here you see live and in action, the students are taking their time to go through the process of a short story tasting. And we'll show you this in a minute. These are their reflection questions. So they keep a record of their thoughts and the process of choosing the text, and they can go back to their thinking at the end and share with their students, share with us. And step 4 over here is the students live in action, reading the rest of the story together and lifting their favorite line and really sharing why they picked that story and going through their thinking together. So again, tapping into their reading, writing, listening, and thinking. This is a slide in the step over here that we use with the students. These questions really promote their thinking, and they're the same questions we always use during every short story tasting. So they are used to them, and we have seen through the year the progress in their thinking and their expansion of their writing and responding and getting more comfortable deciding if a good book is a match for them or not. All right, I'm going to go on to show you the text that you are going to use today. So the year we learned to fly, this was our mentor text for our TC literary essay unit. And we use this book to read to the students and teach them the strategies on. So we're going to actually go through what we would have done in our classroom and show you the choices of the text that you're going to try today. So in our literary essay unit, we gave them the choice of My Two Border Towns, The Most Beautiful Thing, A Map into the World, and Saturdays and Tea Cakes. And in a moment, you're going to have an opportunity to choose the text and read them on your own and go through the reflection.
So I just put in the chat, again, sorry for the technological difficulties. Hopefully you're able to see the Cami in the actual Pear Deck. But if you're not, there's a link to the PDFs of the short stories that you can click on. Or if you are familiar with Cami and you use it often, that's the best way to access it. So you can click on that Cami link. And when you click there, it'll bring you to the first page is a graphic organizer that you can give to students. And that's to respond to the questions. And then if you scroll down, there's copies of the stories that start with The Most Beautiful Thing. So there's 2 ways for us to access the short stories during this time where you guys are going to be reading. You can do it through Cami, or you can do it through the Google Drive that I just shared with you all. So if you could just give me a thumbs up, use that like reaction button, just to let us know that you're able to access those short stories, because we're going to be doing that for like the next 10 minutes. So just want to make sure everybody's okay to do that. And if you're not, you can unmute yourself and just ask or share that you're not able to access them. Okay, looking good. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna virtually take you through a short story. So in real life, again, what that would look like is the students have a bin and they would physically have, at this point, each of them would choose one of the 4 short stories. So they're working in groups of 4 and each child has a short story in front of them. We put a timer on for 2 minutes and they read the short story. When they're done reading in their writer's journal, they reflect by answering these questions. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of time you. I'll play some lo-fi beats to time ourselves. You'll have the opportunity to choose one story right now, read for a minute, and then we'll reflect for a minute, and then you move on to your next story. So if you are in the CAMI, the first story is the most beautiful thing. So we'll say that's the one we're reading first, just for the purpose of this Zoom virtual workshop. And we will start our 1 minute timer. So you may begin reading your first short story. You'll read it for 1 minute. We'll let you know when that minute is up, and then you'll reflect by answering questions for 1 minute. Hopefully that all made sense.
Just one side note, this would lend to that format of the station teaching in the classroom. I know it's hard to visualize that here.
All right, so that's been a minute. Again, we would give students 2 minutes. And now you could take a minute to reflect. You could do it on paper. You could do it in that CAMI we shared, because everybody should have their own copy, I believe. But you're thinking about, what did you feel or wonder about the first page? Oops, sorry. Why or why not you'd want to keep reading, and what you picture after reading that first section. So what you're able to visualize. We'll take 1 minute to do that. All right, so that's been another minute. I love that some people are already sharing in the chat their reflection of what they just read. So I think we'll do, Christine, 2 more. We'll do a total of 3.
Sure, that sounds good. And everyone has access to the other stories then.
Yeah. So now you can move on to the next story. So again, if you're in the CAMI, you could kind of scroll down, and the CAMI, the second story would be a map into the world, or if you want to access it through Google Drive. So again, we'll put a timer on for 1 minute, and then you'll reflect for 1 minute on your second story that you're reading. All right, that's 1 minute. So again, now you would take 1 minute to reflect. What do you feel or wonder about the first page? Why or why not you want to keep reading, and what you picture after reading the first bit? All right. They just reflected, right? They didn't just read. Okay. Forgot for a moment. All right, so then we're up to story 3. Yes, okay. So this will be our last story. Again, typically we do this with 4, but we want to just make sure we have time for discussion, and then 1 or 2 more slides and any questions. So choose your last story to read for a minute, and then we'll reflect. I'm just reading some of the comments already. I like your thoughts on the stories. So we will start our last 1 minute timer. Choose your last story to read and enjoy, and then we'll reflect 1 more time. Okay. All right, that's 1 minute. So take this last minute to reflect, and then we'll move into the next and final step of our short story tasting. Okay.
So if you are
Good.
So if you were in our classroom, the next steps that would happen after this is that the students would choose their text. And again, in that station model, we would do a four-corner approach. So all the students who pick, just for instance, a map into the world, go into the one corner, and so be it. And what would happen at that time is the students would go through the question in speaking form. Why did you choose the text? What hooked you? What words, maybe were challenging to you? And what we would go around and do is that co-teaching model is we would point out maybe challenging words or ask them the question, what words did you find challenging? What we would do with these books, according to the TC Literary Essay Unit, and what supported the reading and writing and thinking was going through character, setting, and theme. So, some of the points that I saw in the chat, some of the challenges with the names, we would help support the students, or they would help support each other in saying the names correctly. We've had that happen in the classroom, who are students who are well-versed in a language would share with the group or with the teachers or with the class how to properly pronounce the name. So it really lends to this organic process of the students sharing, their diverse lives that maybe they don't naturally get to do in the regular, hallways of the school. And it creates such this beautiful community in the classroom of these conversations that you wouldn't necessarily would think pop up, but it really has created such a nice community in the classroom. Oh, you're muted. So we didn't know if anybody wanted to share out now about their feelings about any of the texts, or what would you maybe pick for your classroom?
Yeah, if there was a text that stood out to you that you really liked and why, or what you might use it to teach. So you can feel free to unmute yourselves if you feel like sharing out loud, or if you want to share in the chat. So just to go off of what Christine said, this has been wonderful too, because our classroom is filled with not just English language learners, but multi-language learners. And we've only learned that through these discussions. I would say at least 50% of our class are multilingual learners. And so even if, like the story, My Two Border Towns, the topic of refugees came up. And so we were just explaining, and in fact, we go into a unit on refugees later this year. But we just spoke about immigration and refugees and the difference. And one of our English language learners was brave and shared why his parents moved to the US from El Salvador. And then it was like a domino effect. And one by one, the kids just started to raise their hand and share why their parents moved here. My parents moved here to do this. And my parents left, this country for this reason. And my parents moved here for this. And it was a truly amazing moment of just all these kids feeling proud rather than ashamed that they had come from other countries and that their parents wanted a better life for them. And it was just this great connector of kids in the class. And it was a great moment for Christine and I to see just how diverse our class really is, and to hear these stories from all these kids. So
I'm seeing some people really enjoyed My Two Border Towns, and that's a great book for translanguaging. That was one of the reasons that we did pick it, Tara, originally, and wanted to put in this presentation as well. Saturday and Tea Cakes is one of those oldies but goodies. You know, it was something that I think hooked me earlier in my teaching career, and I feel like is a classic story, you know, about grandchildren, and their relationships that blossom.
So Diana, definitely for the wide range of reading abilities. We also have a wide range of reading abilities. And what's nice about this, if you notice, we've taken picture books and we've put them into the short story format. So again, it looks more advanced than it is, but you might take a simpler picture book with less language in it and use that as one of the options. You could also, if you do this digitally, right, you could even do this as like a video read aloud. So if I maybe had an entering student or a really low level student or a SIFE student, maybe one of the options in the 4 texts that we chose could be like the listen out loud option. So you can certainly differentiate to meet the needs of your students. So with that, I think we wanted to just show kind of a next step. So now they've chosen their text. Christine and I have our mentor text, which Christine had mentioned before. We use the Year We Learn to Fly. And then we would model whatever skill we're teaching that day. So let's just say it's characterization. We're modeling how to pick that out with the mentor text. And then the students go practice that skill of the day with their chosen text. And then that skill of the day is kind of shown here. And these are all just great writing about reading strategies. And you can imagine that these are all great for ELLs because they're very visual. I love the pressure map that we got. I think that's from Jen Saravallo,
Yes.
right?
Yes, that is. Samine Matter was also developed through there.
And then the map it is just really nice. They kind of retell the story through drawing of a map. So these are just great strategies for students to show their thinking. And then lastly, we don't have to spend too much time on this, but in case you are from a different content area or you work with other content area teachers, there are ways to adapt these tastings. Again, it's just a wonderful way to differentiate and give student choice, and it's just engaging and interactive. So we were happy to share this strategy with you today. We have about 2 minutes left. If there's any questions, again, feel free to unmute yourselves or add questions to the chat.
Any other book recommendations too? We always love that.
I have a quick question. I'm James. I work in Limerick schools. And what I struggle with my co-teaching relationship is trying to find a common planning time. So do you guys have any suggestions for how you incorporate that into your schedule, or if you do it after school, or how you've made that work over the years?
Yeah.
We're lucky in the sense we do have 2 common times together, but having said that, we are still pulled in different directions. So we always try at the beginning of the unit to try and meet and go through the unit, what our end goal is and our steps to get there. But in the interim, we have a shared doc. And on that shared doc, we show the flow of our lesson, and we both attach documents, whether Laura creates them, I create them, or we create them together. It's something that we're constantly developing to both have access to it. We both share the Google Classroom. So if any of us needs to see student work or post anything, we both have equal access to it.
Yeah, I think too, like I co-teach in 5 different classrooms. Not all of them look as seamless as this one might appear, but I think that a good strategy for that is just always making sure you know what's coming up in the week ahead, so that even if you don't have that common planning time, whether it's through a text or a meeting, is just what's coming up this week or even this month. And hopefully at minimum, your co-teacher can be able to share that with you. And then maybe you can generate your own ideas to share with them at another time. Thank you for asking, James. So Eric, I think it's time to, I know it's lunchtime, so we don't want to go over.
Right, it is lunchtime. We don't want to keep people hungry. Thank you so much, Laura and Christine, for engaging us in this session.